Kia orana tātou katoa, and greetings, welcome everyone. Thank you so much. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this sorted here. I am very, very much looking forward to sitting beside the fireplace. I hope we can have that as our backdrop for the panel. And I stand between you and some very wise people around the issues. So my challenge, and by the way, it's very exciting for me, I have to say, even though I can't see anyone from up here, but this is my proud first on-the-record speech as Governor of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. So, which is why I'm not going to read it. Oh. You can go and read it. I'll go and talk about something else instead. So it is a very, very important audience, and congratulations everyone, and congratulations the Financial Services Council as well for pulling this together. A powerful audience, and I mean powerful because you truly do influence the economic, financial well-being of New Zealanders, and that is a really, really responsible mantle to be holding. And I know by the mere fact that you've been here and you've been working so hard over the recent day or so, hopefully a bit of fun in between, that you've been working very hard to understand some of the big challenges out there. So this morning's session, what I want to talk about is what I see as the single biggest challenge globally to us all, and that is ourselves. So the biggest challenge to long-termism is short-termism, and that will be the theme of my chat this morning before I get wrestled over to the fireplace, possibly tossed into it. Didn't bring any marshmallows, so if anyone could pop out while we're there, that would be good. What do I mean by short-termism? I mean this kind of continuous drive for instant gratification. Today, this week, or this reporting cycle in our day jobs, this continuous drive for now. We consume, therefore we are. We consume, therefore we don't save, we don't invest, and even when we are investing, we come into some particular challenges which you are both part responsible for, both in terms of the problem and the solutions. When we think about economic growth, and when we're running around in our day jobs, in our normal short term, got to get there, got to have a meeting, got to do this, do that, too often economic growth or economic well-being comes at the cost rather than at the advantage of wider things that we want in society that we desire as human beings. For example, a wonderful virtuous circle would be long-term sustainable economic growth and welfare. It would be one in which the environment is being beautifully looked after and maintained in some kind of kaitiaki spirit that we embrace here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. And it would be one in which people are included, that there's social cohesion, that we are accepted for what we are, we have a big role, and we live in wonderful, safe communities. We don't have to run between gated communities, past gated communities to get to our day job in our wonderful environment. But short-termism ends up meaning that often economic growth comes at the cost of cohesion, or at the cost of the environment, or at the cost of inclusion, and that is a continuous challenge. And a lot of that challenge, I strongly believe, comes in part from because of the capitalist system. I am a devout capitalist. It's, what is it, if you're not a socialist when you're 20, you have no heart. If you're not a capitalist at 30, you have no brain. It was Winston Churchill, I think, who said that. We always say Winston Churchill. He's dead now, so he can't say it wasn't me. Actually, I could say Nelson Mandela. The capitalist system is absolutely necessary, but even Adam Smith, the invisible hand is always and everywhere. Even Adam Smith, the godfather of a lot of what we still understand as capitalism, admitted and acknowledged that it fails at times. There are market failures. And the financial system is a critical part of the wider capitalist system. In fact, it's the engine in the room. And we have a sound and efficient and sustainable financial system when all relevant risks are adequately identified. Bloody hell, there's a risk. They're priced. Ooh, couldn't afford that. And they're allocated to people who can best manage them. So you've identified, you've priced, and you've allocated it to where it's being managed. That's a big part of what, the banking system, the insurance system, and all parts of the financial system do. They try to say, here's a risk, who is prepared to pay and wear that for the return that they're prepared to accept, and how can I make sure it's allocated to those who can manage it? We are very poor at trying to think very far forward. Myopia is humans' probably greatest foil. That's why we're so excited every day, because we think it's just brilliant and we don't care about what's going to happen the next day. But what myopia does means that a lot of risks aren't identified and all priced or allocated to those who can manage them, because either they're too far in the future, and of course it wouldn't happen to me, or we just aren't smart enough. And generally it's the latter, actually. You just don't know what's going to be happening on the way through. So it leaves a lot of unanchored risks and unpriced risks and misallocated capital and misuse of resources. The way in which society generally resolves that is about every 30 years we have a world war or a riot, or we have some kind of environmental collapse and we do a bit of blame storming, lock them up, and then we move on again. We reset the clock and off we go. And that is economic history. You know, the last 300 years have been unprecedented in growth and wealth and per capita income and population and longevity, and almost every measure of human welfare you can have has advanced a lot. But, you know, that's a great outcome, but is it as good as it could be? And generally the answer is, well, no. What are we faced with at the moment? Globally, and we'll talk more narrowly about the particular issues, I'd say globally, obviously we're confronted now with climate change. Whether you believe in the science or not, I'm not smart enough to understand it, so I don't know if I do or not. But I certainly know that it's here, in terms of consumer preferences, investor concerns, regulatory behaviours, pricing. It's real, and it is seriously challenging, particularly this country's future, which I'll come to in a sec. We've got massive urbanisation. When I went to school, I spent 5 years in the full form, and they told me that when I was there was I certainly wasn't living in one of them, I was in Taupo, but there was only 2 cities in the world that had more than 10 million people. The other one wasn't Turangi, that was down the end there. I actually used to think that was the overseas, looking across the lake. Wow, Dad, can we go overseas one day? Shut up, son, drink your juice, I'll be out the pub soon. This was not in the written speech, I don't think, either. So now 2/3 of the world's population, there or thereabouts, well, around 60% by 2030 are going to be living in cities greater than 10 million people. And the vast majority of those cities are going to be in places we currently call emerging markets. And the stress and challenge on all of cohesion, infrastructure, sustainability, all of those things are real. And you're going to have 2 kind of options. One is this beautiful, environmentally, culturally sustainable economic growth world on this hand, or it's going to be gated communities and you're going to work out who's, you know, either you're locked in or locked out. It's going to be hard to tell. You are not going to be in a rich and wealthy society. You might have pockets of wealth, but richness will be challenged all of the time. On top of that urbanisation, you've got mass migration anyway, in a lot part because people are forced. You've got Saharan Africa literally swimming across the Mediterranean to find somewhere where it rains and you can possibly have a living. Soon there's going to be Australians swimming the Tasman. We live in hope. They're bloody good. Shane Gould sure wouldn't. Ageing, and you know, we are just getting incredibly old as humans on this planet. Fortunately, Japan got rich before it got old, so we can watch and observe. They are already depopulating. You know, their population is declining. The wealth is held by the people who are nearly dead, and so they're not spending. You know, they only need the 1 block of cheese and that milk that. In fact, one of the competitions that my kids have at my mum's place is looking for the oldest use-by date in the kitchen. And Watties still don't exist, do they? Is it? So you know, so about the whole societal change, and a real challenge here, of course, is wouldn't it be wonderful if we had jobs that were called careers and that you were really well rewarded, that you could actually stay home and look after the old people, because the old people are actually getting old and lonely. And so that is a massive societal challenge going on. And underlying all of that, particularly a bit about imagine if that was a career, is income inequality. The capitalist system, again, is fantastic at creating wealth. The distribution of wealth is extremely challenging, in part because, not of the system, but the users of the system, us lot. So we're living at the moment in one of the largest secular declines of the returns to labour versus the returns to capital. So even if the pie is growing, the share of that pie is hugely distorted in its distribution relative to some kind of very, very long run average. And there's a lot of underlying reasons and dynamics for that. In large part, the technology challenge means that a lot of these companies are now becoming superstar companies. They're becoming impenetrable in terms of their economies of scale have got so large that already they're well ahead. But more importantly, the capital that they've invested is actually intangible capital. It might be intellectual property or goodwill of some form, and that's hard to replicate, hard to compete away, hard to do. So you're seeing industry concentrations rising, you're seeing superstar companies coming, and they are generally the low wage to profit ratio companies. So high profit, low wage relative to the share, and they're making a sucking sound for the labour. And so you're seeing this happening globally as well. There's also the challenge within, not just between capital and labour, but also between the firms around high wage profit, low wage, high profit firms going on. So again, a real challenge about how do we create a society that can share in the rewards, that can have an income to actually pay and buy the products that are there, and feel included and active. So we've got a really significant challenge for us around recalibrating, re-gearing, doing all of that. What underlies this? I keep mentioning myopia. But a big part of it, and this is the important part for this audience, is the challenge what I'd call the principal agent. You know, I don't call it, it's a well-known economic theory. The owner of the capital, the person who's saved, we've got a couple of them here in New Zealand, has this wonderful ability to invest, and we have these things called limited liability companies, and that means that someone else can use our capital as well as their own and invest and do things on our behalf. That's the corporate society. So the principal is not the agent, you have an agent who's now using your capital. So already there are different incentive structures between us. You know, the first one, I want long-term sustainable happiness. I've got, you know, I might even want ethics just outside of London. You know, involved in what they're doing. I might want it to be sustainable, whatever. But the agent is short-term incentivised. The agent might have an annual bonus structure. Some might even get a holiday to Fiji. The CEO, they're going to get a bonus as long as they can keep costs right down, not reinvest and hope like hell the stadium won't collapse before they get out. So you've got that short-term structure. In fact, you buy it even more in because they're given the annual bonus to buy you into the principal's lifestyle. But in fact, you've kind of created an even bigger principal agent, especially if they're short-term bonuses. So we have long-term strategic visions. You know, companies, yes, we can do it. We can build it. Nike, we just did it, whatever. We then have a 5-year strategic plan that you kind of look at and then it goes in the bin. Then you have an annual report because you have to, because some other miserable bugger insists on seeing what you're doing, the person who used to own the capital. And then, of course, you have the real-time updates. So by the time you've gone from vision to day, we're short-term. And we end up with all of those externalities that come out. I'm not going to be paid to pick up that rubbish as long as I can get my bonus and get out of here. I don't have to train and employ people who might be in my neighbourhood. In fact, I can just try and skimp past it. So there's so many dynamics that go on that because of that principal agent. It gets even more challenging, which is great fun because it would be too simple. We now have principal agent. In fact, I think we're up to agent 99. Going past 86. And what do I mean by that? That most of us in the world, particularly the KiwiSaver folk we just heard from, and I agree, very, very powerful voices, they have decided to get exposed to economic returns. Congratulations. They have done that through a portfolio structure, meaning that they are now the proud owner of many, many hundreds, if not thousands of companies in very small bits. So the principal used to be able to watch the agent because, you only ever had the one company and you used to chase them around and say, clean your shit up and do all that type of stuff. Now, you don't have to worry about it because in your portfolio, for every one idiot company, there's an equal and offsetting genius company in the portfolio. And so you are happily diversified away from the idiosyncratic risk, and you're all safe. And so there are no eyes of the principal over the agent. It gets more complex because you've got the agent, the portfolio manager, who will give you the market return minus their fees, and then they have also outsourced to about 30 other different types of geniuses who are highly skilled who will make you money. And so you've got no real line of sight over that. And that implies that's only a 50-year, the last 50 years this has happened. Portfolios used to be 2 or 3 companies until post-World War II. So, this is a phenomenon that is new and powerful. How are we bridging that globally? Well, here's the good news, the uplifting, morally, spiritually lifting. Investors are becoming more and more like we were as consumers back in the 80s, where we actually started to ask what went into that jar of peanut butter. Oh my God, how many children were killed in the making of this jar of peanut butter? Does it actually have peanuts in it? Has it got my 3 favourite emulsifiers? All those things we now can read on the label and understand. Whereas as investors, we just went, anyway, that's great as a consumer, I truly deeply care what went into that, but as an investor, I don't know, it's all pretty complex, and I might look at my KiwiSaver account now and again. Globally, the investors are now clustering together under very, very powerful umbrellas. Hurrah. Because they've discovered that when they're at home, they're a consumer, and when they're at work, they're an investor, and actually they're the same person. And under these umbrellas, the United Nations Principles of Responsible Investing, hands up, people heard of them? That is fantastic. That is the highest ratio so far of any audience in this country I've spoken to. It's still a disappointing low ratio for the particular audience that I'm talking to. The principles of responsible investing sound kind of relevant because if you're not in that, you must be the irresponsible one. This is a United Nations effort to say here are 5 things that you should do. 4 are really good stuff, and then the 5th one is tell us how you did that, i.e. transparency around environmental, societal, governance issues that they demand for companies to be living up to. United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, show of hands. United Nations Carbon Disclosure Project, United Nations Compact for employer behaviour, about killing young children, sewing up Nike shoes, that type of stuff. It's not to promote that, it's to try and deter it a bit. Just in case you were thinking, bloody hell, I'll get into that. God, we're allowed to do that. I've got kids at home. Pull them out of school. Oh, they didn't turn up at school. So, these are large global umbrellas around which trillions of dollars of capital are now aggregating underneath. I use the UN examples because they're powerful, but there are more. There's the COP22, that thing that we said, Kayla, we will do our best with regard to not burning the planet within the next generation. The agreement that New Zealand signed in Paris. The One Planet, an investor group that's a spin-off from that, kind of like Chachi after the other show, Happy Days, and you've got an enormous set of what I would say civil society, NGOs, companies and investors aggregated together. Has anyone heard of focusing capital on the long term? I would hate to be in their marketing department because they are obviously useless. Or I'd like to be there, it's probably a cosy job. Again, trillions of dollars of capital and some of the world's largest corporates, for example, PepsiCo, the world leader in diabetes, Unilever, one of the biggest polluters, etc., are actively engaged about how to change their companies, their employment, their wages, their behaviours, their externalities into something long-term and sustainable. Now, the New Zealand Super Fund, by the way, my old job, is a member of all of the above. And it comes at extremely low cost because it's about saying I will just front up, and it comes not at the cost of returns on capital. have you seen, because you front up and you do the right thing over the long-term horizon on the way through. So there are great outcomes. Where does New Zealand sit on this, so we can get the panel? We're behind. We're well behind this story. We are, very just slowly waking up to this climate change concept. We like to talk about it. We don't like to do anything about it because hopefully I'll be dead before it really has to matter. We are really challenged. We have the most to gain and the least to lose by being long-term focused. I mean least to lose because we aren't, for example, in the climate change challenge, we aren't dependent on the export of fossil fuels. But we are hugely dependent on the import of foreign capital, foreign tourists, the exporting of a story called green, fresh, open, and then we call it milk. We are isolated, small population, good law of the land, great committed kaitiaki principles that are slowly growing through us. So, we can leapfrog forward in creating long-termism. So think hard about your own firms. Do go and read the speech because you got none of it in this talk. And what I would say is, what's the Reserve Bank doing? Mea culpa. We're guilty of short-termism. We've had hardwired long-termism into us, which is great. That's about operational independence, keep inflation low and stable, and our role as a regulator around the financial markets, about making sure that you're adequately capitalised, you're adequately capable, you've got enough skin in the game to care about things, but it is continuously challenging, and I would say the insurance industry is incredibly challenged around this area at the moment, and you've got a lot of work to do around becoming proper long-term providers of financial services for New Zealand, and I provide a couple of ideas in there. I will finish there. Thank you very much for your time, wise people.